Welcome to Buckeyes Tomorrow Morning for Wednesday, February 8th. I'm your host, Tom Orr. The Indiana game is in 206 days. The game against Michigan in 290 days. We are talking recruiting today. Alex Gleitman has had, for a couple weeks now, been doing his ADET column on looking ahead at the 2024 cycle, names to know, where things stand, how many guys Ohio State's going to be looking at all these various positions. Talked to him a couple weeks ago about the offense. Today we're going to be talking about the defense. Alex, let's start up front. There were some misses in the 2023 cycle, especially at the defensive end position, where they ended up maybe with a smaller group than they were anticipating. So it feels like this could be a very big year on the defensive line for recruiting for Ohio State.
Yeah, I mean, I think you look at the interior, they did a great job last year. I thought they brought in three really good players. And the end, as you said, Joshua Mickens, very good player, but I think they were hoping for at least one of the other three that they were chasing, and they ended up with zero. And that microcosm of the recruiting class is probably when you heard Mark Pantoni a couple weeks ago or Ryan Day talk about adjusting their strategy to adapt to the current world of NIL. I think what you're going to see moving forward is less chasing those national type guys, the Keon Keelys, the Damon Wilsons, the Mateo Uigaleles. And don't get me wrong, I think they're still going to offer and pursue those guys as long as they feel they have an opportunity, but they're not going to kind of put all the eggs in the proverbial basket as they did last year. Because they were left pretty empty-handed. So you got guys on the roster right now, JT Tuimoloau, Jack Sawyer, with good years. Both of those guys could be off to the NFL. It's very possible. And what's behind them? A lot of unproven talent. Caden Curry, Kenyatta Jackson, Amari Abor, those guys could be good, but and then Joshua Mickens, of course, as I mentioned, but it's not a lot of depth. It's not a lot of proven commodities there. So I think you're going to see in this 2024 class. Now, I'm getting my years confused. You're going to see in the 2024 class, I think a big focus on defensive end. I wouldn't be shocked if the number that they're looking to bring in is 3, if not 4, to try to reload that room.
No getting years confused in recruiting classes. That's my bit. Nobody steals my bit on my show. Come on. Who are some of the names? I mean, you mentioned maybe looking a little closer to home with some of these guys. Who are some of the names to know in terms of the defensive end recruiting right now?
Yeah, I mean, I think I don't want to say the thing that concerns me because I think it's too early to be concerned. I think that the clarity will come around June when you see who shows up for official visits, who shows up for camp, who comes to the spring game in April. When we talk about who's serious about Ohio State and who's not, a guy who's made multiple visits to Ohio State now is Nigel Smith from the state of Texas. I think he's someone they have to look at. King Joseph Edwards from Georgia has been up multiple times on his own dime. That's someone you have to look at probably pretty closely. I know Elias Rudolph out of Cincinnati Taft. That's an in-state guy I feel pretty good about. He earned an offer last year at camp. That's someone you feel pretty good about right now at this point, but we'll see what happens. And then, there's a couple other national type guys. Dylan Stewart from Maryland, I think they've got a solid shot with. They just recently offered Elijah Rushing, who had a really good visit. They might be playing a little bit of catch-up there, but they've got a shot in that one. He's from Arizona. Booker Pickett, relative of Ryan Pickett, I believe it's his nephew. You're obviously in the game when you're related to Ryan Pickett when it comes to Ohio State. I know they offered a kid, Marquise Lightfoot, out of the Chicago area. Obviously, regional ties there. There's a few in-state kids they haven't offered that I'm sure they'll want to camp and keep their eye on. Brian Robinson, Kareem Jennings, Javon Hammonds. But as I said, the next few months, seeing who visits for spring practices in March and then in April, maybe the spring game, as well as who takes official visits in June, that will really tell us from a defensive end standpoint, who's realistic and who's not. But I think the names I just kind of mentioned are the names that I would focus on right now if I was an Ohio State fan.
Moving back to linebacker, and it feels like you could take an awful lot of the stuff we talked about with the defensive ends and kind of apply it to the linebacker. They only got one last year. They got Arvell Reese, very, very solid prospect, in-state, Glenville kid. But there were some national names that they were chasing for a good bit of the cycle, and who ended up going elsewhere, and Tackett Curtis, and you've heard us talk about those names before. So I assume linebacker, even though there's only 2 of them on the field at a time, that's still a spot where you're going to have some real area. That feels like an area where they've really got to restock the cupboard this cycle.
Yeah, I feel good about it. I think it's time we stop talking about Garrett Stover as a safety/linebacker athlete. He's a linebacker. Just the way he's talking about Jim Knowles and James Laurinaitis. He's a linebacker, and so getting him in the hopper in your own backyard, big time talent. is big, because I think they're going to try to get 3 linebackers in this class. There's a couple other guys. Peyton Pierce from Texas. I think the James Laurinaitis hiring could have. We don't want to jinx anything. He's visiting the end of March, but I have a feeling that one could end up in a good place for Ohio State. Kingston Valamuasa from St. John Bosco is going to be a tough pull, but he's been to Ohio State multiple times. Last time I spoke to him, I would have said Ohio State was probably the leader. I know James Laurinaitis was on him at Notre Dame. They were another top contender there. You probably have to think about USC and Oregon, those schools out west, pulling to keep him closer to home. But I think Ohio State is in a decent spot there. They're in the game for a number of other guys. Sammy Brown is going to be tough from Georgia. Christopher Jones from Virginia. Aaron Childs from Maryland. Justin Williams from Texas. Edwin Spillman from Tennessee. Those are guys who are all seriously considering Ohio State. I know there's a few in-state guys that they're probably going to take a closer look at this summer. I feel pretty good about where they are with linebacker. Honestly, out of all the positions, maybe not cornerback, but I have the most confidence that need is going to be filled at linebacker just from where they are right now with some of these top-notch guys.
You made an interesting point there, and I want to make sure that people didn't gloss over it. James Laurinaitis has existing relationships with some of these guys because he was as part of the Notre Dame recruiting machine. He knows some of these guys already. So even though he's new at Ohio State, he's not necessarily new to some of these guys that they're recruiting. So that's just something to kind of keep in mind. He may not be starting quite from as square one as you might think there. All right, let's talk about corner, because that feels like, at all of these positions, you mentioned JT Tuimoloau and Jack Sawyer as guys who could turn pro after this year with a big season. And you can do the same. And, that seems impossible to believe because they were just recruiting those guys. It feels like 18 months ago. But now you're looking at corner, Jordan Hancock, Denzel Burke. Either of those guys could turn pro, and they've just lost J.K. Johnson to the transfer portal. You've got, and you basically lost all of your, now I'm going to do the thing where I forget which class it is, 2021 recruiting class, right? With Ryan Watts had a decommitment, and you lose Legend Cavazos, and maybe those are 2020 guys.
2021, I think. I don't know. Yeah, it's
one of those years. It doesn't matter. Whatever year they are, they're not at Ohio State anymore, so they're not on Ohio State's depth chart. But you've had some guys who left. You've got guys who could potentially turn pro relatively early, and it feels like when guys leave after the third year, it's like, well, the first year you generally don't get much out of them. Denzel Burke being an exception, and then the second year, and then the third year, and they're gone, and it's like, what? They just got here. How is that possible? So, what does that cornerback board look like right now? Because that feels like another spot where they're going to really have to make some hay this cycle.
Yeah. I think the great thing about it is you got 2 of the top guys on their board that live in the state of Ohio. So you got Bryce West out of Cleveland Glenville, and you got Aaron Scott out of Springfield. And I think, the 2 of them, look, anything could happen in today's world of recruiting, but I feel pretty good about the 2 of them eventually being kind of when's, not ifs, when it comes to ending up committing to Ohio State. So if you could get those 2 in the hopper, that's a great base. And then, you'd probably chase 1 or 2 more. I think if they want Miles Lockhart from Arizona, they've got a great shot at him. I know they're going to get an official visit from Charles Lester out of Florida. That's going to be a tough pull. Braden Lee in Maryland might be another one of those guys where, if you push for him, that they've got a pretty good shot. Xavier Brown from California is a kid that they just offered. That's going to be a national battle as well. So those are just a handful of guys that after West and Scott, if you get any one of those, you'd be pretty happy. And then you add a 4th potentially at some point. Who knows? We'll see. I know that there's a number of other in-state guys that have Power 5 offers that they're going to be looking at closely. So I think, again, no one's committed yet, which is why I maybe feel a little bit better about linebacker. But when it comes to cornerback, and you're looking at getting probably minimum 3, if not 4 guys, I feel pretty good with the 2 of the top guys on their board being from Ohio and probably being Ohio State leans at this point.
All right, and then back at the safety position, they've got they're going to be chasing one of the biggest names in the class at safety, KJ Bolden. But he's just one of the names on the board. But something I don't think people necessarily know, there's a little bit of a family tie there between KJ Bolden and Ohio State that could help out. So let people know about that, and maybe some other guys who are sort of names to know at that safety spot.
Yeah, KJ is a cousin of Perry Eliano. They got a great relationship. It's obviously would be his position coach at Ohio State, but he's from Georgia. It's going to be a tough pull. I think it's Bulldogs and Buckeyes right now. He's made multiple visits to Ohio State. He'll be up again in the spring, probably then take an official visit in June. So they've got every shot to land him and pull him away from Georgia. It's going to be tough. Alabama's pushing for him, a few others down south. So, can you pull him away from home? I think it's possible, but it's not going to be easy. Obviously, every little bit in recruiting helps, and the fact that Perry Eliano is his cousin is obviously going to help here. They got Vabu Toure out of my neck of the woods in New Jersey, literally an 18-minute drive to Irvington High School from my house right now. I would say as long as Ohio State takes his commitment, which, is not a guarantee, but I think as long as they take his commitment, I feel pretty good about him ending up at Ohio State. If it's not Ohio State, I think Penn State is probably next up. Rutgers, who has both of his brothers in their program, and is obviously the home state school. Normally not mentioned with Penn State and Ohio State when it comes to recruiting battles for four-star kids. I do think you have to consider them as well. And then, there's a few other guys. I think safety's one of those spots where I'm not seeing the pipeline as far as targets, whether offered or not offered. I'm just not seeing the volume there. So I'm curious to see how that one nets out. I think the evaluation period in the spring and then in summer and camp is going to be key. There's guys like Coy Beasley out of Cincinnati, just got a Georgia offer, committable or not, who knows, but he did just get a Georgia offer, and I think Ohio State's going to have to take a close look at him. Cameron Frazier from Columbus, Reggie Powers from the Dayton area. There's a few other guys in state that I think are going to get a very close look at camp. So if you can somehow land a KJ Bolden, if you take Vabu Toure and he commits, and then maybe you take one of those in-state guys with a strong camp performance, I could see that being a really strong safety class to follow up what was a really strong safety class last year, in my opinion.
All right, so that's our look ahead at the 2024 class. Before I let you go, I do want to let you plug one of the, I'm going to say one of the, but it might be the single most popular feature you do all season. It is the look back, the sort of stories behind the stories of the previous recruiting class. It's sort of, okay, everyone is signed, sealed, and delivered, and now the real story can be told kind of thing. It is something that people look forward to all year, and it's coming up. Let people know just a little bit about that and how much work goes into all of that and compiling that every single year.
Yeah, it's a lot of work, and every year I keep telling myself I'm going to kind of take the notes as I go along and start writing it as we go along, but then things change. It's crazy, but it's a lot of fun to put together, but it is time consuming. So I really wanted to get it out for this week. I'm not sure if that's going to be possible, but my goal is definitely the week of 2/13, if not this week of 2/6. So we'll see where we're at, but yeah, we'll probably release it in multiple parts, at minimum 2, offense and defense, but potentially even more than that, depending on how much content we have. But yeah, it's going to be a peek behind the curtain at some of the things that maybe we didn't feel comfortable saying, but now maybe do because guys are signed, sealed, and delivered to where they're going. You never know. You could say something really bad about someone. Not bad, but you could kind of reveal something that you shouldn't in November, and then they end up flipping and signing with Ohio State in December, or just things change in general, and it's just not the best look. So I feel good now that everyone's signed for the most part, with February coming and going, and excited to share some of the stories about what really happened with some of the recruits that Ohio State was chasing at various positions.
And when that is published, that's going to be published exclusively on the Huddle board at BuckeyeHuddle.com. Only way you can see it is if you are a member of BuckeyeHuddle.com. So, boy, if you were looking for a reason to sign up and give it a try for a month, there it is. There it is right there for you. I'm sure we'll have Alex on in the coming weeks to talk a little bit about some of those, but as we always do, we'll talk about a small fraction of what he actually writes about, because there is a lot of stuff in there, and we only need so many stories to fill a 10, 15-minute show. There's always a lot more that's exclusively on the Huddle board at BuckeyeHuddle.com, so sign up there today. And also make sure, if you are listening on a podcast platform, give us a 5-star rating and review there. That will help other folks find those shows. And finally, on YouTube, if you are watching on YouTube, make sure you hit that thumbs up button. That will help other folks find the show there. And leave us a comment. If you want to hear us talk about something else, we're here to talk about what you want to hear us talk about. So leave us a comment. Let us know what you want us to start doing shows on as we head into kind of the depths of the off season right now before spring ball. Always interested in your feedback and what you want to hear more of. So you can do that there. Thank you guys all for joining us. Have a great day. We'll talk to you tomorrow.